Hi, this is Larissa with Advanta IRA. I'm joined here with my associate Mike Ventry, and we're going to be talking today about checkbook control of an IRA. And so if you've ever wondered when you've heard that terminology, what it means, how does it work, we're going to talk about that today, covering two different types of entities that you can use for checkbook control. So we'll be talking about LLCs and trusts and how they interact with IRAs for that purpose. So again, my name is Larissa Green. I'm with Advanta IRA. I'm Director of Education, and I also do sales here for Advanta. I've been with the company for just a little over 7 years, and I am in the Largo, Florida office, and I'm joined by Mike. How you doing today, Mike?
Great. How's everybody doing? I'm up here in the Atlanta office, and want to welcome everybody to this presentation. It is probably one of the more popular educational seminars we do.
That is very true. A lot of people are interested in what we consider like having the ultimate control over your IRA. And so as we go through here, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to either myself or Mike. We'd be happy to talk to you about the structure of deals that you're looking at for your self-directed retirement account. As we mentioned, we have two offices. We're in Largo, Florida and Atlanta, Georgia, but we can help anybody anywhere. And we do have clients nationwide and even worldwide. We've been doing self-directed IRAs for those of you that are listening and are our clients. You know that we're celebrating 15 years in business based on the newsletter that we just sent out. So we're very proud of that. And we have about $1 billion under management. And I have a couple of different things that I want to point out before we move on. So one of the things is that with Advanta, you get very personalized service, meaning you're going to get an account manager, and that person is going to be with you for the life of the account. So if you have questions on making annual contributions, how to pay maybe expenses on behalf of an account, or maybe receive income, that person is with you for the life of your account and can help you with any of those things. So you have an opportunity to build rapport with that person, and you know how to get a hold of them when you need to. And that makes your experience at Advanta different than with any of our competitors out there. We help you understand the rules for self-directed IRAs and give you guidance as to whether or not, the IRS allows or prohibits certain transactions. But what we can't do is give you tax, legal, or investment advice. And so at Advanta, we're here to answer your questions, but those questions that we can't answer, we are going to refer you to legal professionals, tax professionals that can help answer your questions and have helped our clients in the past. If you're not sure if your question falls within, the IRS rules for IRA self-directed investments, or if it's a legal or tax question, ask anyway, and we'll either answer the question for you or we'll direct you to somebody that can assist you. So, Mike, why don't you tell us about self-directed IRAs and what makes our service unique to other things that you have out there?
Well, the true definition of a self-directed IRA is an account that, the taxpayer can direct to choose their own assets, such as real estate, mortgages, notes, private placements, such as LLCs and trusts, which we're going to talk about later, precious metals, invest in foreign currencies, participate in futures trading, and a whole gambit of different assets other than just the traditional publicly traded stock, bonds, and mutual funds. And really, there's no difference from one IRA to the next. All the contribution limits are the same with the distribution rules and taxes and penalties. The only difference really is what your custodian will allow your IRA to hold. And here at Advanta, we will let your IRA hold, alternative assets. The term simply means self-directed means, the owner has the control of their IRA to make their own investments. And why you may not have heard about it in the past, basically most of your IRAs in the past 40 years have been administered by banks and broker-dealers where they're going to make money whether your investment wins or loses. They have a set group of investments that they sell, and you pick from that investment. However, since they created, your IRAs, Title II back in 1975, you've been able to self-direct your own funds. People really have just now been hearing about it the last several years. And I'm we're right about reaching 4% of IRAs are now, fully self-directed, and depending on what resource you use, there's said to be, $2 to $3 trillion of real estate already in IRAs.
And a lot of times we hear, different things like, well, if I don't have a Roth IRA, I can't self-direct it. And so in just a moment, we are going to talk about structures, but we want to tell you, get it out there that if it ends in IRA, it can be self-directed. And that includes some employers' plans as well, including an individual K. And if you haven't heard of that, that's just very simply an IRA, a 401k in the traditional sense, but in this case, just has one participant, you. So if you're a sole proprietor or an independent business owner, you can have a solo 401k, a SEP IRA, or a simple IRA, and those can be self-directed, as well as education savings accounts and health savings accounts. And so if you're considering checkbook control for an IRA, just be aware that any of these accounts are eligible for these types of investment structures that we're going to talk about. And so if you have questions on your specific account, let us know. But any of those accounts can be self-directed, and that also includes old employers' plans. So if you have an old 401k, an old 403b, a TSP, a pension plan, those can be self-directed. You would simply roll them into an IRA. There's no taxes or penalties paid for doing so you can do that very easily, very seamlessly, and then make those investments of your choosing. And so if you wanted to use checkbook control of one of these accounts through an LLC or a trust like we're going to be discussing, you can do that. Again, if you have questions on the different types of plans, let us know. We see all types of self-directed investments here at Advanta, and as Mike pointed out, we don't sell anything inside of the market, and so all of the investments we see are privately held, private investments, and they could be something as simple as private stock, all the way through very unique investments like racehorses, cattle, alpaca. We've really seen just about everything, but what the great thing about checkbook control of the IRA is going to be that, even though with a self-directed IRA, you can make any of these investments, with checkbook control, you really do have ultimate control of the account, and you'll be able to make those investments maybe over a cup of coffee or, on a Saturday afternoon. And if you're looking at things like buying at auctions, although we can help you with that, this might make your investment structures and strategies a little bit easier as you go. And so we like to give you a list of different investments we see. All of these investments can also be made through a checkbook IRA. So whether you're using an LLC or a trust, anything you see up here on this list is going to be permitted in a self-directed IRA with or without checkbook control. And so the number one investment we see is going to be real estate. It makes up for about 30% of investments here at Advanta. And although that doesn't seem like a very high percentage, it actually is the highest percentage of investments. And so just about every day, Mike and I are discussing different real estate investment plans that our clients have and whether or not it's something they can do with a self-directed IRA. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And so here, out of our office, what I'm seeing a lot of is going to be residential property, things that people are rehabbing because you don't have to hold a property for any certain amount of time. People are also buying rental real estate, and whether it's long-term rentals or short-term rentals like vacation rentals, we see a lot of those things. Another very popular thing here is to lend money. And so we see people lend money in the form of a first mortgage, a second mortgage. It can even be an unsecured note, an option contract, an assignment of a real estate contract. There are a lot of things that you can do with a self-directed IRA. And those are some of the more popular or more common investments we see at our Largo office. What is it that you're seeing up in Atlanta, Mike?
I have mentioned before, Georgia and the Georgia state government has gone towards trying to bring in a lot of your Hollywood movie companies that were now known as the Hollywood of the South. And your different movie companies, they don't have to pay taxes for several years as long as they employ, hundreds and thousands of people. So we started seeing, a lot of people start to invest in these movie projects. That's become very popular. And depending on the circles you travel in, which I travel a lot in the real estate association circles, I see a lot of people, partnering their IRAs together to get into, apartment complexes and senior assisted living facilities and a lot of commercial stuff. And then again, you do see a lot of single family, dwellings where they have a rental property in their IRA. It's kind of all over the place. You've got doctors, they know medical and pharmaceuticals, so they tend to invest in those type of things. And a lot of your bankers tend to be more of lenders and do mortgages. So pretty much across the gambit.
And so that's a really good point. The great thing about a self-directed IRA is it allows you to invest in what you know best. And so we really do see people taking their knowledge and helping to save for their own retirements with that knowledge. And so I think that's a really big part of self-directing your retirement account. I also want to point out that this is by far not the only list or the definitive list of things you can invest in with a self-directed IRA. We just like to give you an idea of what we're seeing on a daily basis here at Advanta. And so if you have an investment idea or strategy you're considering, let us know. If it's not on this list, we can help you figure out whether or not it's something that you can do with a self-directed IRA. And so we're going to get into the checkbook control portion in just a second. But I also want to mention, because this seminar, we're not really going to cover prohibited transactions and disqualified persons, with the exception of a quick mention when we talk about trust. So if you are considering doing an investment, keep in mind that it has to be a third-party transaction, an arm's length transaction. And so when you're investing, it's going to be for the purposes of growing the IRA account and not a current benefit to you. So you can't invest in your personal residence, a vacation property for yourself. You can't lend your son or daughter money, and I'll talk about that when we get into trust. But just keep that in mind as we're discussing what is permitted in a self-directed IRA. And again, if you do have questions, let us know and we can help you with that. So Mike, what really is checkbook control of an IRA? How do you accomplish that?
Well, a lot of people call it a checkbook IRA. What really it is, it's just another asset in the IRA, just like a stock. And that asset happens to be an LLC that you create. It's what your IRA is the owner, and you go open a local bank account as the manager of this company that your IRA owns, and your IRA invests in that company just like it would in, Apple or Microsoft, and that sends your money to this local bank account you've opened up as the manager, and now you have checkbook control of your IRA funds. And it's no more complicated than that.
And so in order to do that, you can either use an LLC or a trust. Both are allowed with, some rules that pertain to either the LLC or the trust. They're going to be specific to the entity that you choose. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. So just, as we go through the seminar, keep in mind that, whether you choose an LLC or a trust, you can gain checkbook control, but there are going to be exceptions to a trust versus an LLC, and we're going to talk about that. And again, keeping in mind that we're not going to go over whether or not, one versus the other is good for liability purposes. Those are going to be questions you want to check in with your attorney on, or again, check in with me and Mike, and we can refer you to attorneys that can help you understand those. But, we're going to just talk about it from the standpoint of these are things that you can do with the self-directed IRA, and ultimately you're going to want to make a decision on what entity might be best for you. So moving into it, we're going to first talk about trusts. And so we're going to help you understand the two different types of entities so you can, make a decision as to whether or not you want to use a trust or an LLC for checkbook control, keeping in mind, again, as Mike mentioned, that these are investments of the IRA. So it's IRA funds going into the bank account for the entity. And from there, having checkbook control and making investments. And so it really is an investment vehicle for your self-directed IRA. So when we're talking about trust, you're going to see, and many of you are probably very familiar with things like revocable trust, special need trust, life insurance trust. And when you're talking about a trust, there are specific parties involved, and those parties are going to be the same for all of these. And so here's the definitions for you in case you're not aware, if you're not familiar with trust. Basically, the grantor contributes assets to the trust. And so that's what you're going to see. And when we talk about an IRA, I'll give you those specific entities or persons involved. But those are going to be parties involved in the IRA trust as well. And so grantor contributes assets to the trust. The trustee manages the assets in the trust, is a fiduciary of that trust. And so the easiest way to think about it is the trustee has checkbook control. When you're thinking about your IRA, we're going to talk about where, the rules for self-direction really kind of determine who you can have as the trustee. And then, of course, the beneficiary is the ultimate recipient of assets in that trust. And when you're talking about an IRA, the IRA is both the grantor and the beneficiary of the trust. The IRA and the IRA owner cannot be the trustee. And so when you're looking at using a trust, what that means to you as the IRA holder is that you can have checkbook control through some third party, but it's not going to be you writing the checks. And so that may affect your decision as to whether or not you want to use a trust or an LLC. We leave it completely up to you, just keeping in mind that you do have to have a third party trustee. And I am going to define third party trustee for you on the next slide. But just keeping in line with the definitions, two different types of trusts we see here at Advanta: personal property trust and a land trust. And you can use both, either, whatever you prefer as far as your investment structure is concerned. But let's start with a personal property trust. And so when you have a personal property trust, again, remembering that the IRA is both the grantor and the beneficiary. Advanta is not going to do the trust documents for you. So you're going to have some professional help you with the trust documents. We will give you the name of the grantor and beneficiary as far as your IRA is concerned. It will be up to you to select a third-party trustee. And a question I get a lot is, well, can Advanta be my third-party trustee? And we cannot. We don't want to be responsible for directing investments on your behalf. Remember, it is a self-directed IRA. So you're going to want to find that third-party trustee independent of Advanta. And then ultimately, the personal property trust will have that bank account, and therefore that trustee will have checkbook control. And so when you're choosing that third party, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to work with them in order to have them sign investment documents, sign checks, receive income for the trust for your IRA. With a land trust, you're going to see there's going to be a little bit of a difference here where we can treat this just like real estate. And although you will still have to have a third-party trustee, you don't have to have a bank account. You could, but you don't have to. And so what that means to you is if you use a land trust maybe for anonymity or maybe liability purposes, it's up to you, that we can treat it here like it is real estate, meaning we can pay expenses and receive income through your account with us. And so although you do have to have a third party sign off on investments, you do not have to have them writing checks and receiving income. And so that also, again, may help you decide whether or not you want to go with one trust versus the other, or maybe an LLC. So that's going to be the differences between the two as far as the IRA is concerned. I mentioned third party trustee. So what does that mean? Well, the IRS has outlined who disqualified persons are when it comes to your IRA, meaning that you can't transact with those people, and transactions are very loosely termed, meaning that, you can't buy, sell, exchange, provide a service among these people. And so the IRA owner and their spouse are going to be disqualified persons. Lineal ascendants and descendants, meaning children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents, and spouses and business entities of those. And a lot of times people will say, well, wait a minute, I am the IRA owner, I'm going to have a benefit. Well, the IRS looks at it like you should have a benefit at retirement, but not a current benefit. And so when you go back and look at the trust and who can be a trustee, these people are not allowed to be the trustee. And so you have to find a non-disqualified third party to be trustee of your trust when it comes to your IRA. And so who's not on this list? Well, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, they are not considered disqualified. And so if you feel like one of those people would be a good person as a trustee of your IRA-owned trust, you can certainly do that. It can also be an attorney, a CPA, a friend. And so it's going to be up to you, but just keeping in mind that whoever you determine is going to be the trustee of your trust, that they're going to have checkbook control. And so you want to know that person and feel comfortable with that person having checkbook control of your IRA funds. And so Mike is going to talk now about an LLC and what that looks like for an IRA.
Great. So we've got the member, which is also known as the owner. So the IRA is going to be the member or the owner of this LLC. One of the most common questions or statements I hear from clients is, I already have an LLC, can I use that? And the answer is no. Why? Because they're the member. They own that LLC and they're a disqualified person, and so is any asset they already own. So this is a brand new LLC that the IRA is going to be the member. They, the manager, they are going to be the manager if they elect to, or they could choose someone else. But the manager is also known as an officer, like a president. They're the decision makers. They're going to open up the bank accounts. They're going to make the individual investments for the company, the LLC. And then there's the operating agreement. The operating agreement pretty much spells out who owns this company. You know, the members, you know, the IRA usually, and the member's address, which is, you know, the custodian's, you know, address for the IRA. And it'll also say what percentage of ownership the member has. And usually it's 100% if it's a single member. But if it's a partnership, it could be, you know, different percentages. The IRA cannot be the manager because it's not a person. So it can only be the member. That's the big difference between an LLC that a lot of you may have right now, that you're, you know, you have a real estate company or what have you. You're the member and the manager. In this case, it's a manager-managed operating agreement. So there we go. We were just talking about, you know, it's a manager-managed operating agreement. It can include more than just an IRA, but ownership percentages are based on initial contributions from day one. If more than one owner, you know, you cannot change the percentage amongst disqualified people. And what that means is, as Larissa mentioned, yes, you are a disqualified person to your IRA, and so is your spouse. However, you could partner with your IRA to create this LLC. And being a disqualified person, whatever those percentages are when you create that LLC on the operating agreement have to remain the same. So if somebody takes money, both of you have to take money. Same with if you're putting more money in, both of you have to keep the percentages the same. And, you know, Section 4975, you know, that's pretty much the rules for self-directing. And you can see where some of the rules conflict, you know. So it's always good to have a tax or a legal professional help you if you're going to decide to, you know, take the checkbook under your own control. So no tax returns required if it's a single member entity. You know, it's a disregarded entity is the true title of it. And it's still the same rules as your IRA. It's just an extension of your IRA. And if you do have partnerships, you do have to file. It's a one-page tax return. It's, you know, if they're both IRAs or a 401k and an IRA, they're still disregarded entities, but you do have to file a short one-page return. And then, yeah, different states are going to have different laws. So again, we always ask people to check with their legal counsel or their tax professional. A couple different precedents, Swanson and Ellis. You know, Swanson's a little bit older, 1996. Ellis is more recent, 2013. You know, both of those cases, you know, the IRS took those taxpayers to court for being the managers of their own checkbook, and the court found, yes, you can be the manager of your own LLC that's owned by your IRA. However, you cannot be compensated or be employed by the company that your IRA owns. So those were two big factors that came out of those cases.
And we like to point those out because a lot of times people say, well, how is this allowed? Are you sure the IRS allows this? And we point out those two cases, but there are many. So if you wanted to look up some more, you could Google case law for self-directed IRAs and single member LLCs, and you're going to find a lot about that. And really, like Mike said, the IRS may have challenged it, but they did lose in tax court. And so ultimately, you know, those are going to be the cases where we look back and say, okay, there was a time when people really just did not agree that, you know, the IRS would 100% allow it, but the tax court has allowed it. And again, as Mike mentioned, as long as you're not paying yourself a salary or engaging in anything that the IRS has prohibited per that IRS code 4975, then the tax court is going to allow it. And so that was, really big for self-directed IRAs. And there have been some more recent cases where, they have, again, allowed it as long as you're abiding by the rules and not paying yourself for services that you're doing for the IRA. So you can't pay yourself as the manager. Now we're going to go through some case studies they're going to illustrate the different things that we've talked about or discussed already today, meaning that we're going to start with one case study where Joe is buying real estate directly through his IRA. So we're not going to include checkbook control because we want to show you, the different entities and how they interact with your IRA. So we're going to start with directly through an IRA. We're going to go down to the LLC, and then from there we'll talk about a trust, and basically really kind of showing you what steps Joe's going to take to make those investments through each different strategy being used. And then you'll really be able to see how that works. And keeping in mind, again, as Mike mentioned, you can partner into these entities and even without an entity. So if Joe wanted to partner with his IRA and maybe his spouse's IRA to buy a piece of real estate, he could definitely do that. He just needs to make sure that the ownership percentage is based on the amount each of the IRAs brings to the table for the investment. And as long as the investment is new to Joe, new to his spouse, and new to the IRA, they can make that investment. And then they would be tenants in common on the deed. We don't have an example of partnering today, but if you go to our YouTube channel, or maybe you're already there and you check out some of our other webinars, we do talk more specifically about the rules and how you can partner. And the one I'm thinking of right off the top of my head is the one that Mike and I did just about 2 weeks ago on investing in real estate without paying taxes. And we do go through an example there where you can partner on an investment and how that works. So a first example here, again, is going to be Joe buying real estate directly through his IRA, so without checkbook control. And Joe is going to do that with a traditional IRA account. He has $150,000. He wants to invest in a single family property. And, these parts of the strategy are very important because they're Joe's strategy. And so keeping in mind that Advanta doesn't sell any investments at all, and it's going to be 100% up to the account holder. The strategy, the investment, and all of the specifics that go along with it. So Joe finds the house. He negotiates the purchase price. He decides how much work is going to be needed in that property, and he also determines what he's willing to rent it at. So again, all of those things are determined by Joe. He just comes to Advanta and says, this is what I want to do. How do I get it done? And we assist him with that. So in this case study, Joe finds a house, negotiates the price at $100,000 and determines it needs $20,000 worth of work. He decides that he's going to rent it for $1,000 a month when it is rent ready. So what does that look like? So the process is going to be Joe is going to open his account and fund it with Advanta IRA, and we're going to help him with that. So he's going to complete our forms. We're going to request the funds from his current administrator. Again, keeping in mind that this is not an all or nothing strategy. So remember on the last slide, we said Joe had $150,000 in his IRA and that he was going to purchase at $100,000. He was going to do $20,000 worth of work. So if he just wants to move over $120,000, he can do that, and he's going to direct us every step of the way. From there, he's already identified the property, and he's going to write the contract in the name of his IRA. And so on that second box there, you can see that it's Advanta IRA for benefit of Joe Smith IRA number 800-1234. He is going to sign the contract, basically letting us know that he has read and approved it. So he looks at it, says, yep, this is all of the terms I agreed to, sends it over to us. And then Advanta is actually the legal signer for Joe's IRA. So we're going to sign it for him and send it right back to him so that he can get it over to the title agent, the closing attorney, and whoever else is involved in this transaction. And we are going to have him complete a form letting us know who else we are going to be working with on his behalf so that on closing day, we make sure that everything is lined up perfectly and we can go ahead and fund that investment. So that's very important to us. We work with title agent, closing attorney, and the closing documents. We're going to review them only to make sure that the IRA is properly represented as the buyer on this. And so all the other terms are going to be up to Joe for him to make sure that it's all correct. And from there, we're going to fund the transaction, and we treat transactions as mail away closings. We go ahead and sign everything, fund the investment, and send off the documents. And after closing, all expenses are going to be paid by the IRA, and any income is received by the IRA. And remember, again, keeping in mind that this first case study, this first part of the case study we're talking about, Joe is using his IRA directly. And so that means that, remember that $20,000 worth of work that Joe determined he wanted to do, he's going to hire his vendors, but Advanta is going to pay them. And that's very important. You want to make sure that your IRA is paying all of the expenses directly and directly receiving all of the income. And so Joe doesn't want to front the money for any of the investments that he's making. He wants to make sure, or excuse me, any of the vendors he's paying, he wants to make sure that Advanta is doing that. And so it's very easy to do. He submits an invoice to his account manager, and the account manager cuts the check for him. And if he submits that invoice before noon, it'll be the same. The check will be cut the same business day. If it's after 12 o'clock, it'll be cut the next business day. And so we try to really make sure that we're keeping your vendors happy. We know that, you want to make sure that everything gets done correctly. And if Joe decides that he wants to receive the check so that he can go and pay the vendor on site once the work is complete, he can do that. We would send the check directly to him. It'll be made out to the vendor, but he can be there on site to make sure the work is completed prior to paying his vendor. And then from there, again, rental income is going to go back to the IRA. Now, if Joe wants to collect the rent checks, he can do that, but he wants to make sure that they're made payable to his IRA account so that they're deposited directly to the account. And he can track all of this activity online and with emails from Advanta. So it's a very easy process. Again, Joe opened his account, funded the account, and then made the investment. And now we're going to talk about what does that look like using checkbook control through an LLC. Mike?
Sure. So same first step. Joe opens his account and he funds his account. He's transferring from an existing IRA or an old 401k. His account number is issued in less than 24 hours. And that account number is part of Joe's IRA's name, which is going to be the member on the operating agreement. So Joe's going to create an LLC at his Secretary of State's website, or he's going to pay a CPA or an attorney to do it. When you're creating, the LLC, registering it and ordering the EIN number for the LLC, no IRA information is needed. They're asking for the manager or the officer. That's Joe, if he's assigned to be the manager, his address, his social. Not until you get to the operating agreement do you really need member owner information, and that is the IRA's name and account number. And in this case, Joe's IRA is 100% owner. And Joe is going to send that operating agreement to his Advanta account manager, who's going to sign it on behalf of the IRA. And here's an example of what Joe's IRA's name is: Advanta IRA FBO for benefit of Joe Smith, and there's his IRA account number. Joe doesn't have to put the Joe Smith in the name of the IRA, but it does have to have either Joe's name or the account number. It cannot be missing both. So, as I mentioned, the representative at Advanta is going to sign the operating agreement on behalf of the IRA, and Joe's going to go to his local bank and open up a bank account as the manager of this company that's owned by his IRA. And then Joe's going to be signing closing documents and working with the title agent and the closing attorney and the realtors, doing those things that in Larissa's scenario number one, the Advanta account manager was doing. Now Joe is doing it with the checkbook as the manager of the company. Joe's going to be depositing, rents or income into the LLC's bank account, and Joe's going to be paying, directly as the manager with the checkbook, the different contractors. And another thing to point out, while Joe can be the general contractor, he cannot be a contractor. So that, what does that mean? That means that, say Joe owns a rehab company, Joe's company can't do the work himself. A check can never be written not only to Joe, a disqualified person, or a company that Joe owns. So it's very important to make sure that you're getting third-party contractors to do the work. Joe can pick them out. And a lot of times people will ask, where can I open up a bank account for the LLC? And it's really up to you. I tell people to take in consideration, what are they going to be doing? If they're going to be going to auctions at certain counties, find a local bank, because you're going to need to run and grab a cashier's check, by the end of business that day, if not immediately. So that's something to take in consideration. And then some people will open the bank account at a broker dealer like a Schwab or a Fidelity. So while they have uninvested cash in the bank account, they can also open a trading account and earn interest on mutual funds or money markets. So there's a lot of different choices. It's up to Joe.
And that's a great point. And so, we do have that question all the time. I just had somebody ask me the other day, well, how many accounts can I have in the name of the LLC? And it's going to be up to you. Just keep in mind that you're keeping very good records. When you move from directly investing through the IRA to one of these entities in order to make investments, you're taking us out of the role that we do best, which is record keeping. And so you just want to make sure that your records are going to be accurate, so that if the IRS should ever ask you, you can show, hey, this account was for the LLC, it purchased property, it lent money, whatever it might be, and account for everything down to the penny, so that you have those records just in case. And so now we're going to talk about investments through a trust. And remember, the biggest difference between the LLC and the trust is going to be that with the LLC, you can be the manager, but with the trust, you cannot be the trustee. And so you have to have a third-party trustee for that. And so, again, the beginning steps are going to be the same in every single case. Joe is going to open and fund his IRA account, but in this case, he has a private trust document drafted by a professional showing, again, the IRA is both the grantor and the beneficiary. That's illustrated, as you've seen with all the other cases, as Advanta IRA for benefit of Joe Smith's IRA number 800-1234. Joe has to name that non-disqualified third-party person as trustee, and so he could pick his brother. And so let's say that Joe does pick his brother. Well, in that case, Joe has to have his brother sign off on the trust documents. Joe is going to sign them basically because of the requirement that we have, because we want to make sure that Joe has reviewed them. So he'll sign that he read and approved them. He's going to have his brother sign as trustee. And once that is done, the documents will come to Advanta for our records. And then from there, Joe's brother will be able to open a bank account for the trust. And so keeping in mind, again, that trustee has to be willing to do the services, provide the services that the IRA is going to need. And so Joe's brother will get a tax ID number for the trust. He'll open up the bank account. And then from there, Joe will direct his brother as trustee as to which types of investments he wants to make, the strategies he wants to use, and ultimately what investments he wants to use. But day-to-day operations for that trust are going to be handled by Joe's brother as trustee. So he will write checks for expenses and receive income as trustee of that trust. And so, again, a lot of times people aren't necessarily comfortable with having a third-party trustee, and so they turn to the LLC. And in other cases, people do not like the idea of an LLC, and they prefer to have a non-disqualified third party per IRS rules help them with that. And so it's ultimately going to be up to what you feel comfortable with. Mike, how do you remove cash from an LLC or a trust when you're using it for the purpose of your IRA?
That's a great question. Pretty much the rule is all funds must flow first through the IRA. And what does that mean? Let's say your LLC or your trust is running low on funds and you need to push some money out there. You first have to put the money through the IRA meaning you can't make those deposits directly to that LLC or the trust bank account. Same with taking distributions. You can't directly take them from the bank account of the LLC or the trust. You first have to send the money back to the IRA, usually as a K-1 distribution, and then take the distribution from the IRA. Or then you may decide you don't want a distribution. You want to send the money back to your old, custodian account. You can't do it directly from the trust or the LLC bank account. You have to first send it back to the IRA, and then it's a custodian to custodian transfer. The IRA owner should send in a distribution form, and Advanta will send the funds to the IRA owner and issue a 1099 in the cases that, the IRA owner decides that they want to take personal possession and put the money in their pocket. And then there's a 1099 issued in that case, but there is not a 1099 issued if they decide to transfer it out to another qualified retirement account.
So investment strategies with IRAs, and we talked briefly about this, and again, if you're looking for examples or if you have questions, you can let us know. But basically, you can partner without checkbook control. You can do it directly through the IRA, and if it's IRAs all partnering together, we do all the record keeping for that, and so it's very easy to do. If you decide you'd like to use an LLC or a trust, you can certainly do that as well, just keeping in mind that when you're partnering, again, if you're partnering with somebody that might be considered disqualified, that you're doing it based on the percentage that each person in IRA brings to the table, that you're never changing percentages of ownership, so you can't, sell your spouse a portion of your IRA-owned LLC or trust. And you also want to make sure that if you ever need to add money to it, that you're doing it based on the percentage of ownership, because you could inadvertently liquidate shares or sell shares, and you want to make sure that you're not doing that. And so if, me and my husband have our IRAs partnered into an LLC and we need to add $10,000 and we each own 50% of the LLC, then we would each need to bring $5,000 more from our IRAs to the LLC. And if my husband didn't have enough money, then it would be, up to him as to whether or not he can make a contribution, transfer from another IRA. But I could not front him the money because that would be liquidating his shares. And so you want to make sure that you're following those guidelines when you're partnering. And that's true whether you're partnering directly through the IRA or using one of these entities in order to have checkbook control. Mike, do you want to cover the pros and cons for using an administrator directly?
Sure. So one of the pros, keeping arm's length transaction, with your IRA funds. Your Advanta account manager is going to be pretty much involved in your investments at your direction. They're going to be signing paperwork. They're going to be seeing the different investment vehicles, the paperwork coming through to be able to say, hey, did you take into consideration this person may be a disqualified person? That sort of oversight. So it's less likely you're going to engage in a prohibited transaction. And then, as Larissa mentioned, our thing is record keeping. Having clear records of all activity within the IRA. And then, the negative would be, you are going to have custodian investment fees and admin fees for your different investments you make, which is one of the reasons people, tend to do an LLC that are going to be doing a lot of things at the same time. And then there's no ability to write checks for immediate purchases. However, Advanta, will pay vendors same day as long as a request is in before, 12 o'clock, and we can wire contractors funds. The client can order checks in advance by turning in an invoice so that they have the check ready to go. But, having that check available at 4 o'clock in the morning when a hot water heater breaks, is not going to happen, with the administrator doing it.
That's a good point. We don't work 24 hours a day here at Advanta, so that, Mike mentioned it is very easy to get a check, and so you don't have to have an LLC. And even for those cases where you might be bidding on tax liens and deeds, we can work with you on that. But if you did want control, Mike already mentioned, of course, the opposite is going to be true for pros and cons. When you talk about using checkbook control, you're going to have easy access. You can have more assets and have lower fees. You get some anonymity, but of course, I always do like to point out that if you do want anonymity on the tax records, you can always leave your name out and just use your account number, as Mike pointed out when he was discussing LLCs. And, keeping accurate records is going to be a big part of what you're doing when you have checkbook control. And so, I would say that the IRS probably would not come knocking on your door, but if they ever did, you want to make sure that you are keeping records like we do, because we can account for everything down to the penny in your account in a matter of 5 minutes by running a statement, and that statement can run for the last year or for all the years that you've had a self-directed IRA. And so you want to make sure that you can do that as well, and that's going to be very important for your checkbook account, whether it's through a trust or an LLC. And so which option is the best one for you? Again, we're not here to make that decision. We're here to help you understand the differences so that maybe you can make a better decision based on which you prefer. But we always tell people that you should consult with your attorney or CPA, because they may have an idea of the best route for you as well. And so I think that's always a great way to go. And then if you consult your professional and they have questions, we would be happy to get on the phone with them and answer any questions that they have. But remember that ultimately it's going to be up to you. And a lot of times people will say to me, well, do I have to decide which way I want to go with that today? And the answer is no. If you have an investment coming up and you're not sure whether or not you want checkbook control, you certainly can make that decision later on. You can start with Advanta helping you with that investment directly. And then from there, later on, you can choose to do an LLC or a trust, and you can move that asset down into that entity as well. And so you don't have to decide today. You can decide later on, and it's a very easy switch. And the same is true that if you start with checkbook control and you're feeling a little overwhelmed with it, you can change and go back to having Advanta help you with all of the record keeping. And so all of those things are available to you. Mike and I are available all the time to answer your questions, and getting started is very easy. You can open an account, fund it, and start investing. And typically, I would say a lot of the time, we're seeing it where people find the investment and then open the account. Is that a true statement, Mike?
Yeah, a lot of times people will already be under contract and they'll hear about being able to self-direct, and they'll call and no, it's not too late. It's a little more stressful. You do have to do an amendment to remove yourself as the buyer and refund your earnest money, and then add the new buyer, your IRA or your IRAs-LLC, and then get the earnest money from there. But it's not too late. It definitely is the less stressful to go ahead and open your account and have it funded. Your account manager is in place, so you can at least start making offers, and have earnest money. And then you could bring over what you need once you find the house is under contract and you know what the purchase price is. So it's not too late.
Yep, and that's a great point, because you can transfer between accounts whenever you like without taxes and penalties. Just start with what you need for earnest money, and that goes with the LLC as well. And then from there, when you find that property or that perfect investment, you can move over the remainder of the funds that you're going to need. And we mentioned a couple times that we do classes every week. They're always no cost, no obligation. And so if you have questions on other strategies, maybe like private lending, for example, where you can be the bank for your IRA, you can find all of those classes. If we've done them as webinars, which, most of the time we've covered everything that we do live has a webinar as well. And you can find those all archived at advantaira.com on demand. You can also go to YouTube and search Advanta IRA. Everything is there. You'll also find the events that we have live at our offices, or maybe when we're invited to other offices that are local for us on our events page. And you can also check out the Advanta blog, where we're always sharing information up to date on things that interest you, from, different trends we're seeing in real estate to contribution limit changes for all the different types of retirement accounts. And so with that, Mike, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that is pretty much covers the basics. One thing, yes, one thing I would like to add, when we're talking about checkbook control of your IRA funds, we did cover briefly, you're not allowed to be compensated for being the manager. Basically, you can't be employed by your retirement account. Not only that, but there's no such thing in the IRS's mind as a check being made to the IRA owner for a reimbursement. Any check made out to you, the LLC manager, if you're the IRA owner, is considered a distribution. So those are different things that, you're going to want to make sure you're familiar with, and other things that may cause you to inadvertently benefit from an asset in your LLC. So do take time to get familiar with the rules, and we're here, like Larissa said, for you to ask us any questions.
That's exactly right. And that's a good point, Mike. We do get that question a lot. Well, what if I need to reimburse myself? And so you do want to make sure that you fully understand the structure if you're going to go with, something like checkbook control. But anytime that you have questions, regardless of whether you use an entity or you do your investing directly through your IRA, you do have an account manager here, and that person can answer your questions. And although I always make sure that people that are using LLCs and trusts understand they can reach out to us at any time, most of the time they don't take us up on that offer. And, that's where you could run into an issue with your LLC or your trust. So make sure that if you do decide you want to go with this strategy, that you're checking in with your account manager whenever you might have questions, because that's what that person is there for, to answer all of your questions for your self-directed IRA account. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for this seminar on using LLCs and trusts for checkbook control. Please do check out our other webinars on advantaira.com or YouTube, search Advanta IRA. We'd love to have you join us again. Thank you.
Thank you.